based on both of us, we just want to thank everybody who has been a part of making this dream for our family a reality. We could have never dreamed all of this for Tristan in a million years, and as the video said, you know, if you had to have known Tristan before we had the dog, seeing him sitting here at this table tonight is a dream for me. So we thank everybody for Tribute Freedom, all the volunteers, students from Wartburg, everybody that's made this a dream a reality for us. We thank all of you very much.
I also really want to thank our couple people individually. I really want to thank, but before I do that, I just want to say to those of you that don't know us, Lori's originally from Houston, Texas, and I lived down there for a while. We met down there, and somehow I drove this Texas girl kicking and screaming up into Iowa to experience some of our wonderful winters and spring winters up here that we have. But when we originally were married, we spent a year out in San Diego, California, and then we decided before we had children that we wanted to move back to a smaller community. I'm from Charles City originally, so we decided to move back up here, and we made that decision because we didn't want to raise kids in a giant city where you're just another person. We wanted to raise our children in a community where we felt that, you know, you were a part of the community and everybody kind of looked out for each other. And when we first originally decided to try to get a service dog for Tristan, we were a little bit overwhelmed with the money that we had to raise and what the responsibility was going to take. But I cannot believe how quickly we raised the money, and that's a testament to the entire Waverly and Cedar Valley community. So I'd like you guys all to give yourself a round of applause, please, on our behalf, because and I really need to thank the Stenson family had a big event for us, and Steve Fife was involved with that. And then I really got to give ultimate thanks to my mom and dad. And Mom, Dad, I love you guys so much. There't no way this would have been possible without you guys. You guys have just been incredible this whole time. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking up here because a lot of things that I was going to discuss was in that video, which was absolutely incredible. That was the first time we saw it, and we were both fighting back some tears there just a minute ago. But all the things that you've seen that this dog does for Tristan, this dog is also a major therapy for us. Like Scott kind of alluded to, when you're a parent with a child with autism, you are on constant alert from the second he gets out of bed to the second he goes down. There's a lot of times that Lori and I would just get up an hour early, even though we'd be tired, just so we could sit and enjoy our coffee for a little bit before we had to get the day going. And then typically when Tristan moved down to bed, we would just kind of collapse for about 30 minutes because it's just such a drain on us, physically, mentally, everything. But that drain isn't there as much anymore with 2, because Tristan, 2 has just had this incredible calming effect on Tristan. The fact that we've been here for 3 hours is unbelievable. It's just mind-boggling that we could be here. Our other son's not. He's out in the car right now. He doesn't have autism. Our typically developing son couldn't last that long. So it's the last few times we've been over to my parents' place for Easter and birthdays and things like that. Tristan's been by far and away the best behaved child there. So it's just incredible the stress release that it's been on us. Last Christmas was the first time in 4 years that I've actually sat down and spoke with my family at Christmas, because typically it was just chasing Tristan around the house the entire time. So again, we're so grateful to Retrieving Freedom. We're so grateful to the community, and we're so grateful for Scott. Scott has been amazing this entire time. He's a humble guy, and he hasn't had himself on the back yet tonight, but I think he deserves a standing ovation. So if we can get up for Scott, he's been absolutely So like Scott said, if anybody has any questions, more about what two does for us, what he does for Tristan, or what she does for Tristan, we'd love to answer some. If not, you guys can keep the party going and get the next one. Oh, we have one back there, yes.
First tears? He cried?
No, Tristan, when I think two maybe had gone to vet.
Tristan,
Oh,
Tristan. Tristan, do you want to take his handle? Is this your, Tristan, do you want the handle?
Yeah.
When he was at our house at Christmas and then had to leave?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Tristan, we had to come over just for a couple of days at Christmas time, just to kind of, Scott said, you guys want to have two come over and, we like, come here, Tristan. So two came to our house 2 days. We didn't have two yet. We were told we would probably get her by now. And Tristan did wonderful. He was calm at our house. He was a different kid, like I said before. And then Tristan never cries. Let's just get to that. He has big major tantrums, but he's never ever sobbed and cried. So when two left, Mason actually was bringing two back to Scott's, and Tristan came up to me and he was sobbing. Two has to go back home, and just starts crying these big crocodile tears, and I didn't know what to do. I've never seen a kid cry before. So I called Mason and told Mason, I don't know what to do, he's crying, he's never cried before. So we ended up, we told Scott, and then Scott so graciously let us keep two, and then we would bring two back and forth. And we were just lucky because we live this close to Retrieve Freedom. A lot of families have to fly from across the country to get a dog. And originally, this is another thing I wanted to say, originally, before we found out about Retrieving Freedom, we had kind of heard that it would take around 5 years to get a dog. And we thought, we need a dog now. We can't wait 5 years for a dog. And so blessed, my mother-in-law found Retrieving Freedom and started talking to Scott, and everything kind of worked out. So it's just been a blessing.
Tristan will be turning 6 in June, so he'll be turning 6 very soon. Yep. When he was 2, yes.
And two just turned 2?
Yes. 2 just turned 2. Yes.
When you got to then to pay for two, that you as a family and family members had to raise money for him, is that how that works?
Yes. Retrieving Freedom covers the majority of the cost for the dog. We're required to raise a certain amount, and we had a number of fundraisers. My parents had a big fundraiser at their house. We had donations, came in online, we put it on Facebook. We had people donating money that way, so a lot of friends and family just donated a bunch of money.
So what's the name of your other kid and his age?
Jake, and he's 3.
And how is he taking the two?
Oh, he's great. He plays with two. He interacts with two. Because it's an animal for the whole family. So even though two is primary Tristan's dog, Jake still plays around with him. When we go out in public, Jake's not tethered, but sometimes he'll come up and just put his hand on two when we walk by. So.
And how is two taking to both of those kids?
Oh, great. She's the calmest animal on earth. It's amazing. Those kids jump all over, pull on her ears, and she just lays there and takes it. It's incredible.
How would you recommend to other families in your situation to contact Scott and everyone else at Retrieving Freedom? What would you say to a similar family?
Well, I would just say get in contact with Scott and come out and meet some of the dogs. I know that Scott always says the dog has to choose the child. So it's not just like you sign up and they have one ready. They have to make sure that the dog is the right fit for the kid. 2 was actually supposed to go to a different child, but Scott just saw the incredible connection that 2 had with Tristan, and they were luckily able to find another dog for that child that they thought 2 might go to. So, that's a lot of 2s there. But yeah, there really has to be a connection with, because Scott is very serious about this and wants to make it work, so he's going to make sure that the right dog goes with the right kid. So that would probably be the way to start out. Yes?
Who named it?
When Scott got the dog, it was already named 2. He had 2 dogs donated, and they said this one's 1 and this one's 2. But we decided to change the spelling to TU just to make it look a little cooler, I guess. We didn't want a TWO, so just add a little flavor to her name. So that's what it is.
Did you ever take Spanish?
A little bit, yes.
And you know,
I taught in Houston and in San Diego for 6 years, so I was required to learn some Spanish.
So I'll say, it's the informal Spanish for youth.
Yep. Might have her put a tutu on for Halloween this year.
Other than seeing the way Tristan is, what else do you feel is the best thing about having 2 in your house?
Go ahead.
He's just calmer. I keep saying that over and over again, but just the dog being in our house, being around him, his mood's calmer when he's home. I mean, he's not just out in public, but in our house as well, he is very hyper. So just being calmer, which helps our anxieties a lot more too.
Is he tethered to 2 most of the time?
Just out in public, one of us has to be in control of her at all times. This is an exception, being in this type of environment, but usually just when we're outside, she's tethered, but not indoors.
Will she go to school with it during the day, or?
She will next year. We've got that all organized now, and we just found out he's the first dog to have a service dog to go to school in Cedar Valley. The school he's going to is Orchard Hill Elementary in Cedar Falls, and it's right by a big busy road, and there's no fences around the playground. So it was a concern. So the dog will go with her to school, or with him to school next year.
Much concern is that with Orchard Hill the way it is, right next to Cedar Heights.
Right, it's on that round.
Rainbow. Or sorry, Orchard Hill. Sorry, wrong.
Yeah.
I was thinking Cedar Heights.
It's really close to the main road, so that's one reason. Another reason, it calms him, which helps him focus more. But we're hoping it's going to help him focus on his schoolwork more. We'll see.
And Two's an amazing motivator for Tristan, because when we wanted to get him to do something and he doesn't want to do it, he always makes a connection of when somebody leaves, they have to go to work. Like whenever I leave, Dad's going to work, or whenever Laura leaves, Mom's going to work. So when we want Tristan to do something and he won't do it, we just say, okay, Two's going to work. And we act like we're taking her out the door, and no. And then all of a sudden he wants to do it. So hopefully his teacher next year can kind of use some of those strategies with him at school.
I'm not sure this is a question for you, but how do the Warburg students fit into this picture?
Scott, you want to take that one?
How does it fit into the picture?
She asked how the Warburg students fit into the picture, and I'll let Scott talk about the work that he's been doing with Warburg.
Warburg, Susan Ballin was here earlier, but Warburg has kind of taken us on last semester as a project. And we joined Susan Ballin's class. It was called Military Subcultures and Families, I believe. A couple of students are sitting right here at this table behind John White. And what we did is we took 10 dogs to school, and those students helped train those dogs 2 or 3 days a week, 2 hours per class period. And once they started getting comfortable with those dogs, and understanding how they trained and how we worked them and what those dogs needed to do in public and how ADA responded to service dogs in public and everything that was how Retrieving Freedom operates, then they were allowed to start taking them to their class periods. They might pick up their dog after class and take it the whole rest of the day and bring it back at the end of the night. We went to veterans banquets and fish fries and all these places where the students took the dogs as they were their own service dogs, because in Iowa, a service dog in training has the same rights as a service dog that's placed. So it's been a great way for these dogs to be handled by other people prior to going to the family. Two was already in the home getting trained and worked with Mason and Lori, and she would come back and Mason would drop Two off at 7 o'clock on his way to teach elementary school, and I'd throw her on the trailer. We'd take her to Wartburg, the last half of the semester especially, because we had a golden retriever that was in the class with a group of students, and that dog got put on the bus and sent down to Charles for, Charles, how old's Dale?
13.
Dale's a 13-year-old girl with Tourette's, and this dog was like going to be a perfect match. So all of a sudden we had 4 Wartburg students that were sitting without a dog. So we took Two in, and Two was their dog for the rest. Lori came in and did a class period with us. So they're just a great help in doing more with the dogs than I can do and all the volunteers can do, because you take 10 dogs in 2 hours and 27 kids, you get like 2 hours per dog of work, and I would have to work a 12-hour day to just get the training in, let alone everything else we need to do. So they're spectacular, and Wartburg's been awesome.
Is there any more training, Scott, after the dog goes home? I mean, like next year, is there any?
That's why it's so great with these guys that are so close to us, is that follow-ups. I mean, they can call anytime and say, hey, we're having this trouble, we need to work on this. Lori, now, truly, we haven't, handed any certificates or out or anything and said, okay, great, here's 2 certificates, put it on your wall. But officially, Mason has to stand on this side because he can't take Two into public as a service dog yet, because Mason hasn't got a chance to do the public access test. But Lori, the other day, we have to go through a full 3-page access test where the dog has to lay in public and be good around shopping carts and get out of the car and walk through a parking lot and not eat food if it's dropped on the floor underneath the table and be just this good citizen. And I have to judge them. I have to like the driver's ed teacher. I'm going through this clipboard and, I'm usually really nice. And I put on my driver's ed teacher's face that day and said, okay, Lori, we're going to do your public access test. And I made her nervous. But she did awesome. I mean, I didn't think she failed anything. I mean, everything was absolutely perfect. So Mason has to take that test yet, but right now she is a service dog, not a dog in training anymore. Anytime she goes with Lori and soon to be with Mason. And it was so fun to watch Lori in Walmart, knowing that she was being judged, and you could just see her walking like a kid. I remember to say, sit only twice. And one time, because if you say sit 3 times, that's a failure. The dog has to do it on 2 commands. And one time I did say, don't say it 3 times, Lori. And you can wait in between. She goes, that was fine until you started warning me. So, other than that, I wouldn't have even had to. The dog and Lori did spectacular. So, yes, there is follow-ups. You have to come back and forth. It's going to be harder as we progress into placing dogs a little further from home. And that's the huge importance of this facility. Mary Hatala and Cal Corson are here, and they've kind of taken up our capital campaign on the facility we're going to be putting up on the property next door to me that Dave Yoakum currently owns. But that facility is going to be so important for people coming from out of town. It's easy for Mason and Lori to jump in the car 15 minutes away, come work with their dog. Imagine living in Davenport or Mason City or somewhere where you have a child with autism, you got all this on your mind already, and you got to drive an hour. We've got to have somewhere where the veterans and the children can come into that facility, they can work hand in hand with us, we can involve Wartburg students in a place to volunteer their time, come out there, work in the building. And I've got people coming to me all the time saying, I'd love to volunteer my time, what can I do? And I've got we've got a great kennel, we got a great place to keep the dogs, we got room to, train them, but we got room for like 2 people in there. Chad Johnson and I, or Brent Whiteman and I are in there working a dog, and somebody wants to come in and volunteer. I don't even know, I got 50 things I need them to do, but there's no room for them to do them. So it is going to be a huge benefit, to answer your question on follow-ups, when you get somebody from out of town to come in and be able to stay. And the last thing I want to do, and I don't want to get off on a tangent with veterans, but to have a veteran come in that's suffering from post-traumatic stress, and I'm just going to throw out a couple statistics right now. There's some veterans in the room, but the suicide rate on veterans is getting way, way too high. And to ask a veteran to come into town to work on a post-traumatic stress dog that is going to help him live again and thrive for tomorrow, and then say, hey, go stay in that motel and come back and forth for 14 days to work with your dog, and I can't connect with them while they're here. We need somewhere where they're right there. It's a buddy system. You're working with your dog. You're one-on-one. Same with the kids with autism, and that follows everything. All works in one big picture. So sorry I'm on a tangent, but that's how it works. Yes, sir.
Would you mind just explaining how you're going to allow that to happen with your guest rooms?
Well, the facility will be set up with a training area, a classroom. We're actually trying to incorporate this classroom into Greenview School to allow troubled teenagers to come out and take credited classes working through the dogs, just like the work students are doing. But there'll also be 4 living quarter rooms where when you come to get your dog, you'll have a bed, a room, a place to stay. We'll have a kitchen for all the people to go in and work and eat in. We'll have a lounge for them to watch TV in, and a place for veterans to have a support group with their dogs. And that all works in one deal, because you walk in to get your dog and you stay on the place, you stay in the room. You have somebody like Brent Whiteman or Chad Johnson or Leroy Wolf that's a veteran that says, hey, I want to stay there the week or 2 weeks that these guys are here, as I don't want to come, chaperone, but somebody to say, hey, dude, you don't have to leave tonight. It's 10 o'clock. You don't need to run into town. You stay here. Let's get your dog out. They're in the motel. I don't even know if they're going to show back up at my place tomorrow. You got to get them through that 14 days. So they will stay right there, and we will have, I'm sure there's some in here, but we'll have restaurants or facility, maybe even the country club, Cal, bringing food out to them while they're staying for 2 weeks. And it will be more like a family. We'll take a DVD and we'll film that with the first group of people coming through there. So if you were to call me and say, Scott, I gotta come get my dog, I'm a little nervous, I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. Well, it's real easy. I'll send you your DVD saying, here's the 2 groups that came in before, here's where you'll be staying, here's where the dogs get worked, here's what you go through in those 14 days. It's nothing to be worried about. Just come out, hang out with us, you'll work with your dog, and I think you'll come. But if I say, well, I'll get your room in super rate, and you're on your own for meals, they might not even show up. So, does that answer your question?
It does, and I do have one more follow-up on that.
Come on.
Karen and I are in Davenport. Can we come up and stay with our child?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, come up. Right now, and that's another thing, Charles and I have been talking about this and this is more so on the kids with autism, is that we talked a little bit about when Tristan came in the first time. I thought I explained it pretty well in the video, but if that wasn't chaos, I don't know what was. Because the dogs were crazy, Tristan was crazy, the dogs were all over, Tara was catching dogs, putting them in kennels, and Tristan was letting them back out, and I was trying to catch them, and you've got dogs barking, and it's a great place where we can train and get ready, but to bring a 5-year-old with autism into that, set of stimulus and that crazy environment doesn't work. So, lately I've been trying to I met with this girl from Cedar Rapids the other day, and I told Lori a little bit about this story, but I'm going to hit on it just for a second because it was so amazing to me. I don't know if anybody has seen any of the Temple Grandin's movies or read the book, but this girl came to visit us to look at a dog for autism. And they're from Cedar Falls, so it was a closer trip. But we do have people that are from Davenport calling. And, somebody asked earlier, what do you do, how do you get a hold of Scott? What do you do to get a dog? The waiting list obviously is going to get worse than when these guys came in. So they came in at a perfect time because we can only produce so many dogs. But she said, we've contacted Make-A-Wish. They're going to help us fundraise some of that early funds that you guys, it's $5,800 is what we asked them to go out and help us raise. And it's not because we want them to take that out of their pocket. we want them to show some due diligence in the fact that, yeah, we really want a dog, Scott. We don't have the money to give to you, but we're gonna go out and ask for it. We're gonna go out and be a part of your team raising the money, and it really helps. So she shows up. We go to the American Legion building, okay, because I don't want to do it at the kennel, I want to do it somewhere quiet. And the American Legion building was okay, but I really think that they're trying to conserve money more than even I am, because it was like 27 degrees in there. And there's no carpet on the floor. Brent was trying to hold Memphis, and Memphis wanted to sit on Brent's lap, and it all worked out. But she jumps out of this car, this 6-year-old, and she goes, "Are you Scott?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Did you bring my service dog?" And I said, "Well, I've got a couple along." "Well, I hope you brought my service dog, Scott, because I really need a service dog. And I've been hearing that service dogs help kids with autism, and I'd really like to have one." And I said, "Okay, well, why don't we take a look at a couple of these dogs?" "Oh, I would love to, Scott, I would love to. Can you show me these dogs? Did you bring a yellow one, or a black one, or a golden retriever, or what did you bring me? Because I like all three. But I'd really like a black one if you could get me a black one." And, we are nonverbal, I promise you. So she sits on this chair, and I said, "Can you tell me about your day at school?" She doesn't say a word. I'm like, well, this kid was talking 9 million miles a minute 2 seconds ago, and now she's silent, nothing. I said, "Can you tell George about your day at school?" "George, you won't believe it," she says. "I was at school today, and Mrs. Anderson wore a blouse, and she had it buttoned 3 buttons down, and usually it's only 2 buttons, but she had a black belt on and had a silver buckle, and normally it's a brass buckle, but I couldn't believe it." She goes, and then she'd stop for a second, I could see her rewind those pictures, and she said, and she had black shoes on, usually they're brown leather shoes, and you wouldn't believe Johnny had his book bag, and it was zipped all the way open, and Johnny never has his book bag zipped all the way open, it's usually halfway open, and I could see his books in his book bag, and Johnny usually puts his books on his bookshelf, and whoa, I mean, she was going through this like, and she would stop, she would back up, and she'd say, "Hey, Mr. Johnson," I can't even remember the names, "Mr. Johnson came to the class, and I know he shined his shoes this morning. They were really shiny." And you could see her looking at those exact pictures in her mind, and she would think about it, and she wouldn't talk to me, she was talking to George, and she would get a little ahead of herself, and she would stop, and she'd go, and she'd look at that picture, and then she'd tell George about that picture, and she'd go back on. So it was quite amazing. But then she says to George, she goes, "George, you know what?" She goes, "I know how to train service dogs. I think you're good enough. I can take you home. I can finish you myself. I know how to train dogs, and I know what you need to do. You just got to be good in public. You got to go places with me. You got to help me learn. And I think we're going to be set. And I'll feed you, I'll water you, I'll give you medicine if you want. If you want to get married, we can even do that." I said, "We're in trouble, because this dog's like a year away from getting placed, right? And I don't know if this is the right dog." And I looked at her mom, and I'm trying to think, how am I going to get out of this hole, you know? And I said, "Honey," I said, "can you do me a favor?" She finally answered me now instead of George, and she says, "Yes." And I said, "What grade are you in?" She said, "First grade." I said, "Oh, that's a problem." I said, "because George is only in kindergarten." She looked at me and she goes, "Scott, that's not going to work. You can't go to first grade until you're through with kindergarten." And I said, "You're going to have to do me a favor, because George is really going to have a hard time with this. But I said, you're going to have to explain to George why he's not going to be able to go home with you tonight." And she looks at George and she says, "George, I know you're not going to like this, but Scott told me you're not through kindergarten yet." And her mom and I are looking at each other like, this is working. And she says, "It sounds like you're going to have to get trained a little bit more, and you're going to have to get through some stuff and get to first grade, but you're going to have to do it before I get to second grade. Because I need you to go home with me." And she took that 5 minutes to explain to George why he couldn't go home with her that night. And it worked so good because I didn't have to tell her that she couldn't. And they're coming again next week. But once again, I'm off on a tangent, Cal, but this leads to this fact of being out of the area. And if you come in to this facility and we have a room that is a little bit more quiet than 57 dogs barking in a boarding kennel next to a training facility, or a little warmer than the 27-degree American Legion building, it will be much better.
Kids want a drawing. They're getting anxious.
All right, well, I guess I've been talking long enough. You guys good?